Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here with you. Thank you all very much for coming. Great to be here in Shildon. And I think you'll agree it's absolutely right that we all decided to continue with this campaign in spite of the appalling events in London. We cannot let our democracy be halted by terrorism. And that is because the decision we face is too important, and the decision is about democracy itself. Because I believe there's only one party at this election and only one potential Prime Minister that is willing to stick up for the democratic will of the British people. And only one party that truly believes in that people and in our ability to make a fantastic future for ourselves, and that is Theresa May and the Conservatives. Last year, this country astounded the world by taking a decision that we had delayed for perhaps too long. In the biggest popular mandate ever delivered in our history, the British people voted to leave the European Union. And we voted to take back control of our cash and our borders and, above all, of our law-making system. To put the British people back in the driving seat of their country. To give us the freedom once again to negotiate our own trade deals, to take back control of our economic destiny, and to build on the extraordinary traditions of this country as a global Britain, a trading nation that looks not just to our friends in Europe, but around the world. It is a moment of hope and opportunity, and I can assure you that there are plenty of people in Brussels, and indeed some in this country, who have spent night and day since June the 23rd dreaming, hoping, scheming and plotting that they will be able to reverse that decision. And I ask you, do we want them to frustrate the will of the people? Do we want them to overturn our democratic decision of last year? Do we want them to frustrate Brexit? I don't think we do. Look, in the last year, I've seen Leavers and Remainers across this country coming together, overwhelmingly resolved to get it done and to get the best deal in the interests of Britain and the rest of Europe. And I'm afraid in Brussels, they don't yet see it that way. There are plenty of people who secretly think they can turn this thing around because they've done it before. Look at what happened in France, in Denmark, in Ireland. I've studied the history of the EU intimately over the last 30 years or so, and I can tell you that whenever a population is so temerarious as to revolt against the EU system, whenever a people has risen up and said no to some EU treaty that takes them further into the architecture of a federal superstate, they find that the EU establishment, that great glutinous conglomerate of privileged interests, somehow miraculously persuades them to have another go, have another referendum, and this time come up with the answer that the EU wants. And I'm afraid to say it has worked every time in all those other countries. And this time, in the UK, they have, I'm afraid, another advantage. And that is the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, the only other possible Prime Minister on Friday. And I don't know what Mr. Corbyn personally thinks about the EU. Indeed, I'm not even sure which way he voted. But I do know that he is in no position to lead the negotiations on behalf of this country. And don't forget that they begin in only 11 days on Thursday. Just imagine the scene in Brussels if Jeremy Corbyn were to mosey in to take his seat opposite Jean-Claude Juncker, Angela Merkel, Macron, Barnier, all the rest of them. I think they would look at him with what is called a wild surmise. Not just because they don't know what his position is, but because he doesn't know what he really wants. He doesn't know whether he wants to be in the single market or not. Diane Abbott, the Oracle, says yes. Emily Thornberry says no, they can come out. He doesn't know whether he wants to be in the customs union or not, even though clarity on that issue is crucial for doing free trade deals around the world. He's not even sure he wants to reduce immigration, even though you would have thought that was one of the key advantages of taking back control of our borders. And As for taking back control of our cash, can you imagine Jeremy Corbyn having the grip and the determination to take back control of the 10 billion net, 20 billion gross that we send to Brussels every year? Do you think he has the firmness of purpose to do it? A guy who sends out a signal to all would-be terrorists that he disapproves of shoot to kill, even when those terrorists are threatening unarmed civilians. A guy who preemptively informs any power that wishes to engage in nuclear blackmail that, as our Prime Minister, he, Corbyn, would not, under any circumstances, deploy Trident, so making a nonsense of our nuclear deterrent. For 30 years, he has been soft and muddle-headed on terror. He has been soft and muddle-headed on defence. He has taken the side of just about every adversary this country has had in my lifetime. From the IRA to Hamas, from Soviet communism to General Galtieri, for heaven's sake. And of course, I don't mean to compare our European friends to any of those people, but it is psychologically impossible to imagine him having the grip or the firmness to get the right Brexit deal for this country. A Corbyn negotiating team would arrive in Brussels like a family of herbivores at the watering hole of the lions. They'd be eaten for breakfast. But of course, it's worse than that. A Corbyn-led negotiating team would not just consist of the Labour Party, or rather that group of ex-London loony left that have Corbyn, McDonnell, Abbott and so forth, that have piratically captured the Labour Party. We know... We know that Corbyn couldn't possibly govern by himself. He was forced to go into a coalition with the Scots Nats and the Liberals, so he'd appear in Brussels as a sort of tricephalous monster, Zaphod Beeblebrox, if you can remember him, with an extra head, with Nicola Sturgeon jabbering in one ear, Tim Farron in the other, both of them telling him to do exactly what Brussels wants, because both of those parties are 100% committed to reversing that decision of June the 23rd and staying in the EU. How on earth would Corbyn be able to construct a logical negotiating position with that pair on his back? How could he get it done? The answer is that he couldn't and he wouldn't. His position on Brexit would dissolve into a puddle of incoherence and Brexit would founder. On Thursday, there is only one potential Prime Minister who has a plan for Brexit. There's only one person who has the resolve to get this done and get it done well, and that is Theresa May and her Conservative team. On the 17th... On January the 17th, the Prime Minister set out her vision for our new relations with a simplicity and a clarity that was instantly understood around Europe. Out of the single market, out of the customs union, taking back control of money, our borders, our laws, fulfilling the mandate of the British people and leaving the federalising legal order of the EU, but not leaving Europe. We want to build a deep and special partnership with the EU, a strong Britain and a strong EU connected by a great and frictionless free trade agreement, and united by intensifying intergovernmental cooperation on so many issues that matter to all of us, from counter-terrorism to tackling illegal migration. There's so much we can do together and we will continue to do. We Conservatives took Britain into what was then called the common market, not because we especially loved the idea of losing our sovereignty. In fact, we were always anxious about that, but because we are always and have been the true internationalists. And when we joined in 1972, it felt as if being international meant being in the common market. Do you remember? And 45 years later, it's time to do even more. It's time to lift our eyes to the horizon, to a wider horizon. And we believe it's this country's destiny to engage not just with our friends and partners in the EU, but with the whole of the rest of the world, the 93% of humanity that does not live in the EU, as well, of course, as those that do. And if we are... if we are to make the most of that opportunity, then we need the right economic policies. And it makes me shudder to think that we could seriously be about to elect a Corbyn-led administration that would impose destructive new taxes on businesses, on homes, on gardens, at the very moment when we should be about to go forward with a great new global Britain. Corbyn would take us back to the 1970s, complete with a loony left and union control. This is the moment to believe in the huge potential of Brexit Britain. We have so much to be proud of in this country, so many ways in which we knock the spots off our competitors, not just in Europe, but around the world. We lead the way in so many 21st century fields of enterprise. Universities, biotech, all this, media, the arts, culture. This is a fantastic country. We're no slouches at manufacturing, by the way. Don't forget, there is one factory here in the north-east of England, as I never tire of reminding you, that produces more cars than some G7 countries I could name, but which I won't, for diplomatic reasons. We are making colossal investments. We are making colossal investments, more than at any time for the last century, in the infrastructure of our country, to take it forward in high-speed rail, in new clean power generation, in the development of new battery technology. We are transforming the opportunities of our kids in our educational system, creating the bedrock of investment, public investment, on which business can flourish and grow. Because we are utterly unlike the Corbynistas in this crucial respect, that we understand the importance of business, not just in producing the innovation that enables us to improve our lives and our environment, but in producing the tax revenues that enable us to pay for great public services. A strong NHS, great schools, and great infrastructure. And that is the symmetry at the heart of our one nation conservatism. Great public services financed by a dynamic enterprise culture. A dynamic enterprise culture made possible by great public services. We have so much to look forward to in the decades ahead, a period in which the consultants McKinsey and others have forecast that the UK will become the most powerful economy, bar none, in Europe. And, I mean, in the whole of the European continent. And of course, we have challenges. Everybody understands that. But we can meet those challenges. We're a fantastic country, and we can get it right. We can make a huge success of Brexit and the global role and identity that we now want to forge. But we can only do it if we back ourselves and if we believe in ourselves. And I think that's why it's absolutely vital on Thursday that we elect a government that will negotiate with courage and determination and optimism and belief in the outcome. My friends, we've got just a couple of days to get this thing right. Let's get Brexit done. Let's get Brexit right. Let's believe in Britain. And let's work for the next 48 hours to make sure that our negotiations are led by Theresa May and the Conservatives. Thank you all very much for coming along this morning. Thank you.
ITV News. Sadiq Khan says that London's police are in the middle of £1 billion worth of cuts. And you, as Mayor, you cut the Police Council precept last year. How is that making anyone safer, Mr Johnson?
Well, as everybody knows full well, not only did we keep police numbers high in London with the help of Theresa May. For every year that I was Mayor of London, we were able to keep police numbers at or around 32,000, and indeed, I think they were higher they've been higher in our period of office than at virtually every year in which Labour was in office in the last 13 years before then. And look, we are investing in counter-terrorism. We're putting 1,900 more into our counter-terrorist operations, as well as putting more armed police officers out on the streets. But I think anybody, and Toby Harris, by the way, the Labour peer, confirmed that in his report that he did not think that more armed officers were an essential part of the mix. I think most people would, fair-minded people, would pay tribute to the fantastic work of the armed officers on Saturday night. They dealt with an appalling situation with extraordinary speed and dispatch, and I think within 8 minutes they had neutralised 3 murderers. All I would say is I want a government that supports those people, that believes in what they do, that will give them the backing that they need, against some very clever lawyers who will be looking for all sorts of opportunities to undermine what they do. And it really concerns me that Jeremy Corbyn, the only guy who could be Prime Minister apart from Theresa May on Friday, until very recently was saying that he did not support shoot to kill, which was absolutely indispensable in protecting innocent life on Saturday.
Thank you. Alex Forsyth, BBC News. Foreign Secretary, the third attacker in the London Bridge attacks has just been named. Apparently he is an Italian-Moroccan who tried to travel from Italy to Syria, and the Italian authorities told the UK authorities about this last year. Were you, as Foreign Secretary, aware of that? And given the red flags apparently emerging about these attackers, have the police and security services failed?
Well, I'm not familiar, obviously, with the details of the investigation that you've just announced. We will be looking, and the police, MI5, will be looking at exactly who these characters were, what we knew about them earlier on. And I worked with them very closely, the security services, over the last 8 years when I was Mayor of London. I think they did a fantastic job. I think they continue to do a fantastic job. If there are lessons to be learned from this event, then of course we will learn them. But it is vital that they're allowed to get on with their work, that they are properly supported. And let me just remind you, and forgive me for belabouring this point, but a lot of people have attacked policing, so-called cuts in policing. And we heard earlier from the gentleman from ITV who making that point. Actually, it is this government under Theresa May that has pushed through measures to deal with terrorists, and the Labour Party under Jeremy Corbyn, I do not have any confidence that they would do the same. This is a guy who actually voted against the formal establishment of MI5 in 1989, who boasts that he is voted against every piece of counter-terrorism legislation that has been brought before Parliament. You have a putative future Home Secretary in Diane Abbott, who does not think that Al-Qaeda should be a prescribed organisation, and who voted against that. It beggars belief that these people should be running our country from Friday. I hope everybody will vote for a solid Conservative approach to tackle this problem and deal with the scourge of terrorism in all the multiple ways that the Prime Minister outlined on Sunday in her excellent speech. Jeremy Corbyn, who is at very best weak and vacillating on terror. I mean, he says he's now in favour of shoot to kill. He wasn't until the events of the weekend. I do not see how we can trust him with the safety of our country. He's wobbled all over the place on our nuclear defence. He spent £31 billion on Trident. What's the point of this thing if he wants to send it to sea with no nukes aboard, so the whole country is literally firing blanks? I mean, it would be a disaster. It would be a disaster for the safety and security of, and not just. And by the way, it's not just the safety and security of our country, of the people in this country. I don't think people in this room, or possibly around Britain, realise quite how much other countries look to us and depend on us. We are one of the great nuclear powers of the world. We are the second biggest NATO contributor. We have a huge military presence around the world. We do a massive amount to defend our values. They would be appalled if Britain, with all the good things that we do, was suddenly abstracted, taken away from the defence of Europe and of the world. And that would be the real tragedy, in my view, of a Jeremy Corbyn premiership, to say nothing of the catastrophic damage that he threatens to do to the economy, whacking up taxes on business to pay for his pie-in-the-sky plans to renationalise industry. I think the trouble is, young people these days, And I don't want to sound, I'm 52, so I've got to admit, I realise I'm now, people do not remember nationalisation. They don't remember what it was. They don't remember Soviet communism. They barely remember socialism. Well, I do. We don't want it back in this country. It would be an absolute disaster. It would be an absolute disaster. For heaven's sake, let's spend the next 48 hours fighting for sensible, moderate, one-nation conservatism. The symmetry of that idea that I've tried to describe to you, where you have a strong and dynamic market economy that pays for fantastic public services. That is what we want. It's very, very simple.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.